Well, man, I love what you're doing, your background. I'm
Thank you.
just absolutely honored to be able to interview you. So
Oh, I
thank you so
appreciate that.
much.
That's very kind of you.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking a minute out. And I want to begin our adventure into your various adventures by asking you this.
All right.
5 years ago, this pandemic changed
Yeah.
everything for all of us. How did you get through the pandemic of 2020, and how much of living through that radiated into your world today?
Wow, that's a good question. Not one that I have been asked. How did it impact me today? I mean, our impact. What's interesting about that? I feel like everything, it's sort of like zooming on your life, but you don't have any choice in the matter. It was like the camera was zoomed all the way in to look at all of your flaws as an individual, as a parent, as a community member, as a spouse, just all the different quirks maybe that maybe they're not flaws, but it made me you're very aware, especially at that point in time. I mean, that COVID, that following that school year, my daughter, that was kindergarten for her, was COVID and masks and,
Yeah.
partition sort of walls or glass between desks and that kind of a thing. I had my own bouts with it as well. That was challenging. I was at Vanderbilt's hospital and I was like I was early COVID and I was one of the only people there. So it was this very weird Twilight Zone kind of an experience.
Yeah.
I think that probably like most people, you just feel more vulnerable,
Yeah.
you know? And the interesting thing is, it's funny that you ask it in the way that you did, is that after COVID, then I had so many of the experiences that I talk in my book were post-COVID. When I talk about my travels and people that I've interviewed, and in those instances, the power. If somebody said, "Well, what's really the lasting power of those experiences?" I think it's because it allowed me to have a different relationship with time. Because that's another thing that COVID did for people. A day wasn't just a day anymore. A day was chunked differently. I think it was organized differently, right? If your kids went off to school prior to COVID, but now they're home,
Yeah.
that hour can either feel like 2 or 3, or you can feel compressed, like you don't have enough time to even breathe
Yeah.
because you have so much to do and now organize on top of your own life with kids and family and responsibilities. So it did give me a different relationship with time. And I will say from an African perspective in my trips to Africa, it's almost supercharged in that regard because I think you do have um, time is not as we know it in the Western world in different parts of the planet. And you see it in every which way, Joe. You can, we're here. I might say, well, after our conversation and interview, I'm hungry. I'm going to grab lunch or something like that, because my internal clock says this is about the time that I would be, you know, grabbing some food. But if I'm in a different country where that is just not
Yeah.
literally and figuratively on the table, your body and mind adjust. So you
Yeah.
just have a different relationship to time. So it's a winded way of saying I think that looking back retrospectively, my understanding of time and the way in which I occupy that time and how it impacts me has been forever changed. It really is. It's returning that rental car over the spikes and knowing you can't back up. You just will
Yeah.
not see the world in a different way.
As a prolific interviewer and delving into the personalities of people, did you find that the process of interviewing was a regenerative, almost therapeutic activity for you living
Hmm.
through that time period?
You're good. You're a good interviewer, Joe. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think there's probably, yeah, I would imagine that there's some percentage of that you can't, and that's kind of that's, I don't know if that's a secret sauce, but yeah, there are times where you connect with people and you maybe wouldn't say it, but maybe there's a look they give you or a response or a pause in a response that immediately sort of triggers or there's a tripwire that says, "Oh, that reminds me of how my dad might have responded," or a best friend or a child, Um, and I think over time, in combination, those interviews have taught me a lot about my own voice. And that's what's fascinating because I would have considered myself someone with, I'd say, stronger opinions when I was younger. I talk a lot in the book about my late father who grew up as a young person in Nazi Germany. And, he had a very strong personality in between really sort of extended bouts of silence because he just didn't know how to engage in a world that wasn't war torn.
Yeah.
And I find that with other people that I've interviewed, that have been a part of wars. And so I had stronger opinions, I think, maybe because of that. But then going through and getting my doctorate in clinical psych, what's fascinating about that is, and I say this in jest a little bit, but you spend upwards of 7 years, or let's just say even a decade in your training. And what's the one thing that you could say that you wouldn't maybe say within sort of the hallowed halls of academia is that that is a profession that kind of takes away your opinion or your understanding of where your opinion lies within yourself because it's not your role to integrate in your bias and you do your best to be able to be a neutral party to allow for the expression of experience, good, bad, ugly, and different by those that you're working with.
Yeah.
And so you do feel a little bit numb to opinions when you leave that world and you plug it into conversations with people and finding the timing of everything. It's almost like learning how to dance again or something
Uh-huh.
like that. It's like, wow, I could do the two, I could, whatever. This sounds like I'm dating myself and that I'm much older than I am, but it's like, oh, I knew the foxtrot, at one point.
Yeah.
And I had to reteach myself that. So yeah, I think it's gone a long way in helping me understand where my voice is, the power of silence, and not being afraid ultimately, Joe, of asking the question that in the moment you feel like I think so. My public speaking life, I think it's like someone who performs as an actor or a singer. There's a magic in front of a live audience,
Hmm.
and you can read the room.
Hmm.
And when you feel that, and you lean into something that you maybe at the outset would have said, "Oh, that's not an angle I'm going to take," but you do it because you feel it in the room or with it that one individual, and it works.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a drug of human interaction. I don't know how you quantify.
Yeah. I just interviewed a pianist, Bill Charlap, jazz pianist in New York, and he was weaving together this metaphor of like a balloon, like because he was singing with Dee Dee Bridgewater. They were doing a duo and they have an album together. And he was just constructing this Norman Rockwell painting of a balloon floating around, and they never let it hit the ground. And sometimes it was jagged and weird, but other times it was beautiful. And just I kind of think about that in an interview sense, how you just kind of always have to keep the balloon in the air. And sometimes it might go this way, other times it might arc just perfectly, but it's that whole metaphor.
I'm going to use that if you don't mind.
I love it.
It's so true. I just think about even young kids and sort of that game of don't let it hit the floor,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
And to think of that in combination with or in a world of conversation where, because I think a lot of times conversation or finding someone's story, the first hurdle is just saying that you, meaning sort of me in those instances, have enough value to contribute to a conversation, share
Right.
an opinion, an observation, learn from the other person. But I think that's kind of within the dark corners of our mind that we're not going to say that to somebody, right? But
Yeah.
you can see when people sort of they get their sea legs and then the conversation is off and running. They sort of get through that. And the easy example is like a blind date
Yeah.
or, a job interview where you're not exactly sure. You've got all the ingredients in your mind, these story elements, and you're not really sure how they're going to lay out, and you just hope that you're not sweating profusely, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. So let me ask you this. When you were a kid, was this your dream? If you were to run into yourself as a 12-year-old boy and you were like, hey, this is what happened. Was this a part of your vision?
So the initial vision was 60 minutes.
Okay.
So my father, we had very few points of connection because the age difference, he was much older. So it was very hard. And he came from a world where dreams were not allowed. And if you dreamed, you learned the hard way that that's just not in the cards. I've always been a dreamer and thought sort of big and bold in my own way, but that's just even as a kid. But 60 Minutes was the one thing, even when I was really young, like, it's like a child's story. It's like 3+ or whatever it says, like, is appropriate so you don't choke, right? Or a rating for a show. I don't think that 60 Minutes was sort of, for a 4 and 5-year-old, but I was there watching with him because that was a shared time. And as I got older, then I would ask questions, and it was a way for me to, a word that comes to mind is prove that I cared, I was listening, I could somehow be on a level of I don't know, like intelligence. Like you want to be like your dad, right? You want to be sort of, and whatever that is. It's like me playing ping pong with my newly minted 13-year-old, who the other day, Joe, he took an early lead on me, and he's a very good trash talker, and I'm guilty of I think planting that seed just because I
Yes.
love language in all different ways. It's my version of being cool and maybe being able to lay down a lyric, and it's not. But and he said something like he said. He said, "Well, looks like the dynasty is dying," right? Because he was beating me pretty soundly, and I thought, the light switch just went on, and then I handily came back and beat him, and he wanted to go at it again, and I did it even worse, right? And so I think that just as a father son in that instance, you have those points of connection where it's not that you want to compete with your dad, but you want to sort of be on the same stage
Mhm.
to some degree, right? And to know that you're associated and connected. So 60 minutes, really, that was why 60 minutes for me. But if I was looking and I could see into what today is, I think I would be incredibly excited. But I would probably, if I'm honest with you, I'd probably be incredibly reticent and downright nervous about how in the world would I get to where I've landed
Yeah.
because I did not take this prescribed route. I describe it as Forrest Gump, and I've had experiences where Forrest Gump has actually come up in very random experiences around the world where you say, okay, that's not a coincidence. So that would be my biggest challenge would be I don't know if I have the stomach for trying to figure out
Yeah.
this sort of I don't know, treasure map, right? Because I do know how lucky I am
Yeah.
in the sights and sounds that have come before me and the people that I've been humbled that have shared their time and their stories. So, but yeah, I think I'd probably be pretty excited because
Yeah.
I take pride in not being a one trick pony in what I do and who I interview. And
Yeah.
that's been at the outset. But I used to get a lot of flack for that. I don't know about your experience in the interviews that you choose, but people would say to me, well, why do you, like, in 1 week, you might interview someone in entertainment, a politician, an investor, a mom who started a bakery that's taking off, whatever it is. Or I would interview high school students that were doing amazing things. And I'd say,
Yeah.
it makes me better.
Uh-huh.
We're all humans. It's just
It's
about where on the spectrum, like of life, are we? It's like a
uh-huh.
slide ruler.
Yeah. It's that Malcolm Gladwell idea. I mean, once you get to that 10,000 hours, it's like, but it's also life is fascinating because people will ask me, they're like, wait, so you got a jazz radio show, but you do all these others. It's like, I'm just fascinated. I think that, especially in podcasting, we're entering a therapeutic realm of celebrating ourselves as human beings and professionals because the media paints it so black and white. There's so much gray area. We're all doing so many wonderful things and heading towards the same sun.
It's so true. And that's what I love about your show so I don't play music. I That's not my area of expertise.
Yeah.
I've been very fortunate to be around very famous and successful musicians, and that's been just powerful. In the same way that when I'm meeting with a Hall of Fame athlete, that would have been a dream of mine, but that just wasn't in the cards. But I do reference jazz
Yeah.
in a lot of things when people will ask me about my writing. So this is, and maybe you're the perfect person in this regard. You tell me if I'm far off the field here or off the ranch. But I take pride, especially in my writing. I think that so literary agents, the big thing they'll talk about is does that writer have they found their voice? To
Yeah.
me, that's all about rhythm. That's about the pacing. That's the do we have it? Do we, that there should be a sensibility of it. Now we can feel that in a poem because their poems are generally or typically shorter,
Yeah.
right? Experiences it's like a short film or something like that. But there's a rhythm. I think that when you find your voice, and
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that my rhythm or writing is the way to go at all. You and I could have very vastly different sort of approaches to the way in which we convey the written word, but I could read your writing and there's a rhythm to it where I walk away going, that's Joe. And that for me, that's if I do that and I'm expressive in the way that I do that, that's just like going and listening to someone, who plays bass guitar in a jazz group. And it's
Yeah.
like I recognize that. I know the sound, I know the temp like that's who's playing this. You know what I mean? And to me that's the greatest compliment for a writer or a musician.
Well, that's the big thing with jazz musicians. There's a quote in Paseo High School here in Kansas City where Charlie Parker went, and it's something along the lines of "Let your voice come out of your horn." And when you do
That's
that,
so great.
it's all about finding that voice. I mean, Miles Davis famously said at one point, It took me decades to find my voice. Yeah, you can play an instrument, but when you find your voice, when you find your meter, when you find the way that you can communicate with somebody, that's the golden touch. That's it. That's when you
And,
find it.
it's so true. And I love that reference, those references. To me, it goes to and it connected to, and I did share this. It sounds like we've got a good rhythm going here, Joe. From my
Yes.
my perspective, you're a very good interviewer, but it's like I think about so like TED or TEDx talks, right? They're really, big in especially in North America and Europe. People get very excited about those sorts of things. And it's like knowing that like when is your like finding your voice and knowing when sort of it's time, right? It's the oven it's ready. Everything's sort of ready.
Yep.
I had been asked about doing a TEDx talk, and this was years ago, and it was like, wow, this is so exciting, right? Because what would this do for me, right? This would open more doors and I could interview sort of even more people and I would have less barriers to entry. Whether it was public speaking, these different things. And as the process went on, all of a sudden I got a call that the topic that I was going to cover, that happened to be that the governor was going to speak on that. And in a given TEDx talk, you don't have sort of competing topics. And so I got bumped, right? There are worse things to be bumped by than sort of ahead of your individual state in that manner. But I spent time with a dear friend of mine, Richard Gerver, out of the UK, who's his mentor is Sir Ken Robinson, really the man without who TED Talks, I don't know where they would be. He passed away a few years ago, but I had the honor of interviewing him on a couple of occasions, meeting him in person, sharing a glass of wine with he and his wife one afternoon. And if you haven't seen his TED Talk, go back to it on
I will.
creativity. Sir Ken Robinson is the scribe of our time in so many ways. And Richard said to me, I was so down about not getting that TEDx talk, right? And he just said, your story isn't ready yet. And that resonates with me even today. It's just a way to sort of step back, big picture, in the moment,
Yep.
right? I think you want to have that sort of gung ho, you're ready to sort of attack the world and life. But sometimes I needed Obi-Wan Kenobi to kind of tell me, hey, young
Yeah.
Jedi,
Yes.
wannabe, right?
Right. Exactly.
So I don't
Exactly.
know when you talked about that Charlie Parker element, that quote that's what and so it doesn't have to be a TEDx talk, but I think it's in anything. It's this notion of, am I ready? Is my story ready? Has it matured to the point where I think I can apply different elements of learning and wisdom, right? I like to talk about it's the characters we play in the stories that we live. And what character are we playing and who's in charge of our story? And if we're not in charge of it, in essence, why? Because there may be a fantastic reason, a very
Yeah.
relevant reason that I'm playing the oak tree on the stage at a local Kansas City elementary school.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Young Rod is not ready. Joe takes the stage, and Joe's got the commanding voice and presence to lead our school play. That's okay because maybe there's a lesson in that, right? And so not all stories have to be glamorous or happy endings. And we know that the power of song is, right? When you're a kid and someone breaks up with you, or you don't make the soccer team or the basketball team, or you don't get picked for the play. Oh, those are just devastating moments, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of if you zoom into the bubble of that experience and what aligns with us and also brings us out of it, outside of friends and family potentially.
Yeah.
Music, right? Song.
That's it. That's it. I remember the first real big interview I had in the jazz realm was with Sonny Rollins, and my engineer, who's one of my best friends ever, said to me something very poignantly. And he said, when you have an interview with somebody, you think it's a one-way avenue. He was just taking the gist of me, but he said it's a two-way avenue. They get something from you. What has that been like to relive this life that you've lived in your book? What was that two-way avenue that was such an epiphany for you as you wrote this book?
Wow. Um, it's so funny because I think of two things come to mind. Um, I think one, there's a preciousness to life, and that may sound a little hokey, and I don't mean it that way, but I kind of do as well, especially during the chaotic times I think that our planet is undergoing right now. I'll give you sort of the spectrum here, right? So in one instance, I'm at a refugee camp in northwest Uganda, And I'm there to study storytelling in Eastern Africa. That's gone back just generations. Incredible bucket list that you wouldn't even know you should put on the bucket list, but to be able to do that just means, it evokes the questions of like, why me? Like, how did I get so lucky to be able to do that? And a young man who at the time, this is a couple of years ago, I believe he was 26. He was South Sudanese. His entire family, outside of he and his mother, had been murdered, and he'd been in this refugee camp for years. He now was at a point where he could not attend the school at the refugee camp because he was too old. Yet he wanted to be a medical doctor. And when I met him, I have never, even to this day, Joe, I have never been in the physical presence of someone whose eyes told more of a story than his.
Well,
It's like we can use the word purgatory, and I don't know if okay, that just sounds terrible. I don't even know if I have a concept of what maybe that is, at least in the Western world. Like, what is that?
yeah.
There weren't even fumes of hope emanating from him. He was in what I would deem as purgatory, the ultimate purgatory. Because his mother had left the year before because she couldn't stand not knowing if anybody had survived. And so he didn't even know if she was alive. And he was on his own, on planet Earth, among 70,000 refugees. And we spent a few minutes. I got some of that story. The next day I was walking with somebody and I saw him. And he was just sitting in this dark green, like plastic chair that you see around, like when I've been in Africa. It's just, it's like, the life of a plastic chair in Africa, I'd, do a story on that. It might be fascinating.
Yeah.
And I, to this day, regret that I didn't politely exit the conversation I was in and just go and not even like, just sit with him.
Yeah.
That changes you. I think that changes your chemistry. In the way in which you think about taking it, it's not even taking advantage, but like understanding the moment, right? And that's where, like, when my subtitle of the book, "Authentic Storytelling That Meets the Moment," like I took forever on that because it's that meeting that moment. In that instance, I did not meet that moment,
Yeah.
right? And so, but it has bettered me to understand that I never know if I'll go back to Africa again. That would be devastating in so many ways, right? Because it's so powerful. So I have to live in the moment and take that and say, can I sit with that and understand what that lesson is? Not what I can do with it, right? That's the other part of it. And the other side of the spectrum is, being in Los Angeles, getting a chance to interview Magic Johnson, and it totally swings the pendulum, right?
Yeah.
Because now I'm the one sitting there going, do I have the value? Do I have the worth to be able to sit here and converse with somebody who is iconic in any way you can sort of measure it, in his accomplishments and in notoriety. And yet what's interesting is I was able to find my voice, to the earlier point, and meet the moment and go with my gut and read the situation. And so if my failure at the refugee camp led to my ability to not miss the moment, because I took a massive chance. What's the first question you ask Magic Johnson? When they're miking you up and there are all these people in the room and the heat's getting on you and you have to be a cool customer, right? I mean, what do you do? And
Yes.
so to me, those are they're like polar opposites, but yet to me, they're like back to back.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally get what you're saying. What was a dream interview for you that came to fruition or that you want to see come to fruition?
Well, I will tell you, I'm endlessly interested in whatever is next.
Yeah. Right? I get it.
I don't care. Probably, I mean, if I lose that, then I've reached my own version that does not equatable to what that individual. His name was Mawa Emmanuel, the refugee. So I'm always curious about what that is because there've been so many times where I would not have known. It's like when I interviewed. I'm a huge sports nut. Like the stories of sports helped raise me in many ways, and so I would live and die with my Detroit teams. My day at school would be better or worse depending upon what my bad boys were doing.
Yeah.
And And so, yeah, I don't know the most so that's what I was going to say. Like when I found out, I had a 3 hour window. I found out that I was going to be interviewing Charles Barkley
Yeah.
that day. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I've had those kinds of experiences. They're all fascinating. There have been ones where I've said, I don't know like, how am I going to approach this? Um, that ended up being ones that were incredibly powerful. I will tell you one that to this day I put in my top, I would say top three or top five of the over 4,000 I've done, and no one would ever guess it. And it's because what came out of it was a sound clip that, and now a friendship. But I interviewed a Vietnam veteran, and his story was so powerful. But here's what I'll tell you, Joe. The minute that it was a remote interview, the minute that he came on, his voice, it sounded like he couldn't even get a breath. Like death was not just at the door, but it was like behind his chair.
Wow.
And it's because of an injury that he suffered, a catastrophic injury in Vietnam. And so I'm sitting there thinking, do I bring this up? You know, it's like one of those things like acknowledging what's in the room. I mean, like in the therapeutic world, you know, that would be maybe a part of how you might approach something, right? Something that somebody brings into the clinical office with them. And that is one that I hold on to because I actually leaned into the voice. I wanted to know about it. And because I was curious, he shared this incredible story. I did not know this, that there was one nurse from U.S. forces that was killed by enemy fire in Vietnam. And she's actually very famous because of that. Sadly, she lost her life. Well, unbeknownst to me, my guest, my interview guest, David, he had this unbelievable story. So he gets just, you know, they think he's going to die. The injuries are so bad. And they're wheeling him into the Quonset hut. And he looks up, right, in this staggered, you know, just end of life kind of a thing. And he looks up and he sees this woman looking down on him. And it's this nurse. And she asks him what his religion is. And why? Because they think he's going to pass away. And do they need to get a priest or a pastor or, right?
Yeah.
And he says to me in his gravelly voice, I mean, you can hear the gravel in there. It's just, every breath that he looks up at her, and he said he hadn't seen a woman in forever, you know, and he just said, like out of a movie, he said, you know, kiss me, right? And I can't do it justice because of the voice. It's just so powerful. Like you feel bad. You don't know what to do when you hear this. And then he says that after he said that, the pentothal hit and he's out like a light, right?
Yeah.
And then she ended up dying after that, you know, from enemy fire. That to me, so it's, yeah, there have been great where I just go, I cannot believe I'm doing this, that I get this opportunity. But just from capturing a story,
Yeah.
right? And here's the thing, I knew in the moment, I think it's one of those things, I knew in the moment that if I didn't ask him about his voice,
Yeah.
I'm doing a disservice to his story.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's because it's him and he's lived with it his whole life. And so he's become a friend, and we've even talked about a book project. So I think the world of him,
Yeah.
and that was, I hold that dear. And then there are the times where I did take a leap. You know, I got a phone call about interviewing Habib, you know, the UFC Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
And if you watch his highlights, for anybody who doesn't follow UFC, and I hadn't followed UFC, there's a reason why they would call him terrifying. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it was just like you're getting in there, and you good luck coming out, right?
Right.
And so I get a phone call, and they just said, "Hey, this is who we are. We heard that you might do something different. Can you be down? You know, whatever." And then so I took a risk, and I said, "Sure," because why would I not want to capture this guy's story? And I said, because I had nothing to lose. Maybe you'll appreciate this, or you never know, right? And I said, well, I think it should be in person because of the language. And I said, I think we should do it in the octagon, and I think you guys should film it. And they said, give us 5 minutes or whatever. So we hang up, and they call me back, and they said, he loved it. And then
Yeah.
like a couple weeks later, I'm in the octagon talking with this guy about life after fighting. and how all he thinks, like what his dream is to go back to Kazakhstan and sell tomatoes and vegetables to local villagers.
That's it.
And I thought, and what was nice, of course, you never want to read feedback and stuff because you just don't, right? The sort of these,
Right.
the dark
Yes.
hole of like commentators through social media. But I was really humbled because so many people said they'd never, I mean, they were like he was like their hero and they'd never heard any of those stories.
Wow.
So I take pride in those things, right?
That's
Like
it.
if you were a famous musician, like I would tell people, I still do this. It's like, look, if I can find it in a press release, I'm really not going to talk to you about it. Maybe
That's
in
right.
passing, but for me, that's not that connection. So I'm not even really interviewing you. Like if I'm interviewing you, Joe, I'm getting to know somebody.
Yeah. I get it. I totally get it. I gotta know, and I'll tell you who mine is. Who would be the one person that would be difficult to interview? And I will tell you mine, but I would still do it. Would be Bob Dylan.
And okay, well, qualified difficult, or why you would say difficult. I mean, I think I know, but
I, well, speaking of 60 Minutes, I remember when he was on with Ed Bradley, and I've seen him enough, and I know how he rolls. I've seen the movies. I've been a big fan. I just think that Bob he's the kind of guy that just doesn't really, he's just not hip on the whole like media thing. He just doesn't
yeah.
get it, right? And even if you go in with the best intentions, like I think Miles Davis, for instance, I think he would find a soft spot. You could dig in and find the marrow and
A
find the
shared
warmth.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with Bob, I think there's a level of Bob he's like that jawbreaker you're never going to get to the middle of. You're going to try. You can suck on it. You can try to bite it with your teeth, but you're
Yeah.
going to break a molar.
You
So perhaps. But who would that be for you?
The first thing that came to mind is I will type of person. I've only had this one time, and this person I think very highly of their accomplishments. I interviewed a woman, incredibly successful, um, and I'd met her in person. So this was not like just cold out of the box kind of an interview. So polished, so straight to her lines that I finally told because they would keep reaching out to me or publicist or whatever, do another whatever, and I said I can't do it. Like don't come back to me. Like I can support her from afar, but this is like this very odd puppet experience that I just that's not for me. I mean, who would I interview that I think would be difficult? I think it would probably be in the political realm.
Yeah.
That would, I know that's probably a lazy answer, but it's a true answer that there would be. I've done a lot of advocating and I'm sort of picking my spots where I think we're infringing on the power of what it is to be human and to understand the messiness of it, right? I mean, especially in the Western world, everything is so synthetic as it is that we're going to start stripping away, put paint thinner on everything. I think we lose an opportunity for the next Charlie Parker or whoever.
Yeah.
And so I've advocated. So I think those would be the ones where it would be very difficult for me to not come across with some level of bias in my tone and knowing that because the challenge for me would be in that if I wouldn't really, in essence, ask the tough question, then I would be doing a disservice and or capitulating to whatever views I didn't, were not a part of my ethos.
Yeah.
So I think those would be the most difficult. But thankfully, here's how I think about it. You tell me if this resonates with you. I'm not of the sports like I watch every sport. But I never enjoyed playing baseball. It's too slow for me. I always liked faster sports as a
Yeah.
kid. But I thought about this. I mean, this may have been post COVID, actually, going back to your original question. I started thinking about these opportunities as at bats. So
Yep.
every one of these opportunities is an at bat. Even if it's not that I'm doing an interview, but I'm a part of that ecosystem of keynote speaker, live moderator on stage, like meeting these people, heads of state. These are at bats that will make me better in understanding just my fellow, human in that way. And if that's the case, then hopefully I'll ask some better questions.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's at bats for me. That's how I think about it. So every one of these things, like our conversation right now, it's an at bat.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that metaphor. So let me ask you this. In the length of a tweet, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, everyone you interview, colleagues, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you in the length of a tweet?
Perception of me, great question. Length of a tweet. See, that's the difficult part, Joe.
Yes.
I would say I'd like to think the perception is that my efforts, something around genuine, right? I've lost a heck of a lot more than I've won. I know that much. And a lot of that is because I'm a guy who says yes to almost everything.
Yeah.
And so something that would sort of string together an openness or vulnerability that may be deficient in sort of my approach, but the intent is good or comes from a place of wanting to provide opportunity for others. It's so I'll sort of put a pin in that and just say when people have asked me like, well, what's the goal of your book and this kind of a thing? It's like I just hope it does well enough so that it lends sort of new opportunities to come to the door for me to capture stories of other people.
Yeah.
Like in the next thing, it's not about, and so that's the hope.
Your book is wonderful, The Narrative Edge. If anybody wants to get a copy, they want to see any of your work, any of the good business in your world, where's the best place for people to go?
Well, appreciate that, Joe. I would say just drrodberger.com. Pre-orders are right now. I guess, that's a part of writing. Even when you have a publisher and everything, you just don't understand those components. And I'm learning very quickly. So pre-orders are going on. It hits bookshelves November 12th. So now I'm just working on different elements. Tour stops, remote tours, that kind of a thing. But yeah, and all my handles are Dr. Rodberger. So whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram, and I don't have anybody running those things. So if you message me and you get a message back, it's me. It's not a bot or somebody, someone younger than me without gray hair who's just kindly responding with my voice.
That's it. It's the real deal. That has to be a lot of fun, man, to be able to kind of encapsulate this life, to put it out there. I just think when I look at like the romanticism of things that people get to do, writing a book is hard, promoting it is harder. And then to be able to go out and to indulge those that really dig what you're doing, that has to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see how that plays out. I hope so. I've been very humbled because I understand now the power of testimonials and blurbs, and I have received countless from around the world because I've been very lucky that my network is global, and that's pretty humbling that I'm getting the same sort of response to the sheet of music that I've put together in the form of a book.
Yeah.
And that's very humbling. So yeah, I look forward to what that will, and we will see. I've got a lot of travels coming up here quite shortly overseas, and I hope that it translates, no pun intended, to those environments as well.
Absolutely. Dr. Rod, this has been an absolute honor. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your story, and good luck with everything. I look forward to what comes next. It's wonderful.
Thank you, Joe. You've been really a wonderful interview. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Looking to get new clients to your business through cold calling or email marketing? At Agency Y, they envision a world in which small and big companies have equal chances to win new customers in the market. Their purpose is to bring parity and reduce the gap between large and small firms with the help of their cold calling and cold email marketing services. Use the code Joe Dimino 10 at www.agencyyyy.org/coldcallingjoe.php or www.agencyyyy.org/emailmarketingjoe.php to get 10% off your first order. This is Joe Dimino of Neon Jazz and Famous Interviews, and I stand behind Agency Y to meet your business dreams.